So I want to take you through all the main conclusion questions, the principal questions and the parallel reasoning questions today. So let's start off with the main conclusion questions. As I said, I will link my other videos in the description box that covers a little bit more of the breakdown of the structure and how you might want to approach these types of questions. But these are definitely the easiest type, and they make up 25%, usually about 25% of the critical thinking questions. So a really good type of question to get really nailed down, something that you feel very comfortable and confident in, and it can guarantee you quite a lot of marks. So let's get started. So obviously, first things first, it is a main conclusion question. As I've mentioned in the past, you're looking for sort of subjective, you're looking for an opinion, something along those lines. As I said, looking for words like must or should can be a good way to think about it. Already I'm seeing here should here, so I could make the assumption that this is the answer. Obviously you don't want to look at the answers first, but just something that I might think about. But let's read through it together. How much does an aeroplane weigh? So you've got some sort of a stem here, something that introduces the point. Why a manhole covers round? Again, something that is introducing the topic that they plan to talk about. Despite the popularity of bizarre questions like this in interviews for jobs in the big tech companies, they have been proved to give little insight into the applicant's ability of personality. So what you've got here is a stem, some sort of introduction, and then a comment on it. Up until now, we haven't had a suggestion for what the result of this would be or what should be done as in response to this. So none of this has come up with a conclusion so far. Applicants faced with such questions would be well advised. Here we go. So we've got our first kind of opinion word, to reconsider their interest in working for such companies. So that would be our conclusion right there. Let's just follow along just to make sure the answer hasn't come out later on. A study which investigated why these approaches persist concluded that these brain teaser questions are popular with interviewers who like to protect and enhance their self-esteem by appearing to know the answers to impossibly difficult questions. They enjoy the feeling of power and superiority over the candidate, revealing a narcissistic or sadistic personality. No one wants to work with someone like that. So what you've got here, stem, comment, main conclusion, and then the mechanism supporting this conclusion. So that's the argument that explains why we've come to that. So we'll just match it with this. And it is in fact this one actually. Job applicants faced with brain teaser questions should think carefully about working for that company. As you can see, it's exactly the same question. Think carefully, well advised to reconsider their interest, etc. So that is really nice and easy. Should be something that doesn't take you too long at all. So let's move on to the next main conclusion question. I think the next one was, here we go. So again, main conclusion, part-time undergraduate student numbers have fallen by more than 50%. Again, statistics, I'm sort of introducing the fact. This represents a lost opportunity for people wanting to improve their job options. A comment on it. More needs to be done to provide support for people to take short, flexible part-time courses. Here's your main conclusion. So what follows should be exactly the same as we had before, mechanism or argument supporting it. A survey was conducted, So the previous one was saying, a study was whatever, same sort of thing. So this will be the mechanism for this main conclusion here. And they're basically, just to summarize, they're saying something along the lines of reasons for why people are against this short, flexible part-time course. And basically they're saying we need to change this so that people can improve their job options, I guess, in the future. So again, we'll just match this up. Here we go. So again, you've got this word needs in here, so that would be quite a good little clue for you, even if you didn't have enough time at the end, a little bit of a shortcut. So hopefully this should get a little bit repetitive in terms of how you answer and approach these questions, and that's a good thing. If it's a little bit boring after a while, it just means that you're that familiar and you're that confident with it. Here we go again. If we were able to detect an alien transmission from outer space, ought we to reply? They use a lot of these kind of rhetorical questions to introduce some of these topics. That's not really going to be a conclusion though. There are good grounds for keeping silent. After all, how do we know that any such aliens will be peaceable? But the truth is that it is too late for such precautions. Here's your main conclusion, and the reason being is that this is an opinion. The truth is something, there's no point deciding if we should be silent or not. So since World War II, we've been broadcasting. Here's the mechanism, the argument, broadcasting, TV, whatever. Admittedly, they've been quite weak, but extraterrestrials the difficulty of this is nothing compared to launching weaponry. Any society who could threaten Earth will already have the kit required, whatever it is. So they're basically saying there's no point caring about whether any aliens have detected us and whether we should reply or not, because if they had seen it, it would be too late anyway. So this would be the one. So you want to try and match it as much as possible. In this particular sentence, this type of main conclusion, unlike the other ones we've seen, it's not a direct copy of it, because it's got this part here. So whenever you've got such X, you've got to refer back to what are these precautions, and those precautions would be the part before, which is grounds for keeping silent, as we can see here basically. Hopefully that is clear for you. Main conclusion is one of those that you don't need to check every answer, because if you found the correct sentence in the paragraph, it should just basically copy over directly. Okay, so again, just looking at these options, I think it's this one just because of this language, but we can double check it. As a result of a recent initiative, energy providers are encouraging their customers to have smart meters installed. Smart meters are recommended because they help you to control your energy usage, and therefore you'll have lower bills. So that is, again, introducing comment. However, you should refuse to have one installed. There we go. And then they're going to explain why. And we know the next part will, because they haven't yet explained why they don't think we should have one installed. They've just kind of said the reason why people are saying we should, and then it's going against it. So the reason is the device only tells you how much energy you're using. It doesn't suggest a cheaper alternative, and as a result, the information, the rest of it is going to be fairly pointless to read. But as you can see, it is this answer. It is exactly the same one. In this case, you don't have to go searching for what it's talking about. You're just directly copying it over. Okay, so as I said, follow along, and hopefully this should be nice and dull. Is really what we're trying to get to. Here's another one. So you can see there's a lot of main conclusion questions in this paper. I think I counted 6 in total. I can't quite remember. But all of them, very similar structure so far. It's been introducing topic point, a comment on it, main conclusion, and then the argument. It doesn't always have to be like that. In the past, I've seen it obviously come out at the beginning and then arguing, or at the end, after a big argument. I think because that's becoming a bit more obvious, they've changed it to more of this kind of structure, but that's not always the case. In 1992, the bestseller Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus was published. Decades later, even in places where women and men occupy relatively similar positions in society, the notion of fundamental psychological differences between the sexes still has great appeal. However, again, if you see this word, generally the conclusion will follow. If it's following sort of a topic and then something that people have are said to believe, and then it says however, usually you're going to find a conclusion. This idea that men and women are from different planets is as unfounded as it is enduring. That is the main conclusion. And then the rest of it will be explaining why. Research has found no evidence of any differences. Studies have been debunked. Women's community, all of this is just noise now, basically. So you would just want to match that idea, and that would be, here we go. And the reason we know this is the case is because you've got 2 words in here that you know have to be the same. You can't have just one of these be true. You can't have, a little bit similar. It has to be precisely the same. And as you can see, we've got unfounded, unsupported, and the persistent is obviously the same as enduring, and the subject-object are the same. Okay. I think we've almost reached the end of the main conclusion questions. Let's just run through to the end. Floor. This should be the last one then, 49. Okay, so again, you could maybe skip a bit of this by trying to look through the answers first. Obviously, I prefer to read through the paragraph. Couples who want to divorce will face a less confrontational process under recent proposals to change UK law. Proposed changes would remove the need to show evidence, da, da, da. So again, you've got exactly the same structure, introducing the idea and then what people believe generally. Additionally, the opportunity for the other spouse to contest the intent to divorce will be removed. these reforms must be enacted as a matter of urgency, and then some more argument for that, but I've seen that, so I'm pretty happy that that is the case. The only case where this rule may not work is maybe if you've got two sentences that contain something like must or should. In that case, you have to look at, is one of them kind of a sub-conclusion and is one a main, but that rarely is the case, to be honest. So let's just see what that one would be. This one here, without delay, matter of urgency, the same thing. So really with main conclusions, you're just playing a matching game, which is quite nice. Okay, let's go back to the top now, and I want to go through the principal questions, because the principal questions make up about, I think, 4 questions this time, and then the parallel reasoning as well made up another 4. So even if you cover main conclusion, parallel and principal pretty confidently, you're looking at sort of like 15 of the 25 answers already kind of sorted for you, which is the majority. So I would definitely focus your practice and learning towards these if you are struggling with them. Obviously, if you're confident, then just focus on the others, but majority rules type thing. Okay, so principle. Now, don't get principle and parallel reasoning confused. They are completely different, and the way you should approach it is also completely different. With principle, what I suggest is you find the sentence that kind of summarizes what the principle or the argument is, and then enact that particular thing on these A to E. You should go through all of A to E just to be sure you haven't got one that fits the principle better than the other. But whereas parallel reasoning, you have to look at the whole structure of it. With principle, you can often take the shortcut of just finding the sentence, and the rest of it tends to be an example of said principle. It can sometimes provide additional information, but generally it's just an exemplification of whatever they have stated in a sentence or so. As I said, parallel reasoning, completely different. You must look at the entire paragraph. So, there is often talk of this or that job being exploitative, or of people on low wages being exploited by their employers, as if there is something deeply unjust about paying someone poorly. This part, as you can see, is the example part. But this misses a fundamental point about injustice. You cannot be unjustly treated voluntarily. So this is going to be the principle here. If you agree to the action, you are not being unjustly treated. So this is the sentence that I would identify as being principle. Let's just read the rest to make sure that we've got the right one. Anyone who accepts a job regardless of pay is not being unjustly treated by their employer. Obviously, this does not apply to someone forced into a job against their will, but if they have accepted their job, even if the reasons pushing them to accept it might be deemed unfair in a wider sense, the act of employing them cannot itself be deemed unjust. As you can see, this is just expanding upon this sentence here. So this is the only important one. So we have to look for somewhere where somebody has voluntarily agreed to an action, and then there is some sort of result in treatment, but it's something that they should have known or that they had signed up for. So there has to be an agreement between employee and employer, between the two. So an aid worker who freely goes to work in a war zone and then gets kidnapped and held for ransom cannot complain about the actions of their captors. Obviously, captor and aid worker have no such relationship. This is not as a result of a contract or something that was agreed upon. A patient who gives fully informed consent to take part in a clinical trial for a new drug has no right to complain about experiencing the drug's stated side effects. This is correct. As you can see, they gave fully informed consent and then they suffered stated side effects. Yeah, it sucks, but it's not unfair, according to this principle. Let's look through the others to make sure. As a person who deviates from the terms of their contract cannot complain if they are dismissed for misconduct. Again, this is not quite the same relationship. I suppose it's an interpretation of it, but it's nothing to do with unjust. In fact, this could be, I guess, I mean, I hope that's obvious. I don't know how I could possibly explain that, but it's not the same thing. If someone gives out their credit card details to a cold caller, again, this is not going to be the kind of relationship we want. And someone who suffers as a result of the policies of party they did not vote for, there's not even any engagement between the two here. So principle is surprisingly, once you get used to picking out the correct sentence, it's actually not too tricky, I hope. Let's have a look. So, okay. So we've got I think actually let's maybe go through all the principle ones first. Here we go. So again, principle, so we're looking for the sentence. So Many drivers think that the law that makes it compulsory to use a seatbelt are an intrusion into their private lives, a denial of an autonomous lifestyle choice. Again, this is all example, but state intervention in our freedom is justified when, because of our short-sightedness, impulsiveness, or carelessness, we act in a way that actually or potentially restricts our freedom, especially when dangerous and irreversible consequences are involved. Here we go. And then I think we should probably, in those cases, the law should protect our future selves from the short-sighted and foolish choices of our earlier selves. So this is kind of the result of that principle. It should require us to act in the way that we would act if we carefully took into account our long-term welfare. The legal requirement to wear a seatbelt is thus a protection of drivers' freedom and future self. So we're basically saying if an action that we undertake would lead to dangerous or irreversible or anything that could basically restrict our freedom, then it is justified that the state should intervene to prevent that, basically by law. And it's clear that it's to do with the legal requirement as well. So let's look through the options. A, pedestrians are legally prohibited from crossing railway tracks except at designated points. This is nice because we've got something that the state is preventing us from doing except at certain points. And obviously this, due to short-sightedness, could lead to damage to ourselves, injury, and so this would be the best exemplification of it. Let's look through the others. So passengers must be in possession of a valid ticket when boarding a train. This is private, this is not state intervention. The state funds a campaign to raise awareness. This is not prohibiting anything, this is just providing extra information. Cigarettes are legally required to be obtained. Again, you're not restricting any behaviour there, you're just hoping to make it less attractive. Cyclists are advised, again, incorrect. Okay, moving on. Should probably have written down some of these, what questions they were coming out from. Here we go. So, again, principle. Rona is a self-employed IT tech. Some of her clients are also friends. When she checks the computer for problems, she sees what is stored in the hard disk. She has sometimes teased friends in front of others about the websites they've been visiting and the pictures she has seen stored on their computers. So that is all example. Here's the principle. She should not have done this because it is wrong for people to reveal sensitive information which they know only because of their work. Okay, so we're basically arguing here any behaviour which you learned through the course of working which is sensitive should not be revealed if it's wrong, basically. I mean, I just repeated that, but you know, that is the principal sentence. Let's try and match it to these answers now. So, A, anyone who in the course of their work discovers evidence of terrorism should report it to the police. Now, this is not going to be the same thing, although tempting. It is revealing some sort of information, but it's just you're providing evidence. It's not quite the same as revealing some sort of sensitive information. This is potential evidence of terrorism. It's not quite the same thing. Police officers should be dismissed if they pass confidential information. So this wording is the same as this here. To journalists about cases they have investigated, obviously in the course of work, and you're revealing it to someone here, so this would be correct. Doctors and nurses should have access to patients' medical records in order to give them, of course, not correct. This is nothing to do with sensitive information and you're not revealing it. You are, this is actually just a service that's being provided. Ex-boyfriends and ex-girlfriends, not in the course of work. And teachers often come to know a lot of information about the families, which they should report. Again, there's no proof that this is sensitive information being revealed, and the report is not the same as revealing that sensitive information because it's not being given to the general public. Okay, hopefully again these are becoming easier for you. You're starting to see maybe a way to do it, solving it fine, but also a way to solve it maybe a little bit quicker. Should be another one in here. Okay, I think this is the last one. So, acting is surely the most overrated. Here's our example. Top actors are held in high esteem, sometimes walk into the profession without training, win critical acclaim. Captain Phillips' example, he was chosen because of looks, some natural ability. How difficult can it be if natural ability is enough? In any case, no one should be admired for having a natural ability. There we go, that is the principle that we want to find the best example of. It's like being congratulated for being tall, it's just further examples. But there's our sentence. So something where you're receiving admiration because of something that you were just born with, basically, with no hard work or no other factors, environmental factors. So we should not praise a 5-year-old child who picks up a golf club for the first time and strikes quickly. So praise, we should not be admiring them, same thing here. The music Mozart composed towards the end of his life should be thought of more highly than when he was very young. I mean, he was still composing. You can't just wake up and compose. He would have had to have some element of work in there as well. So it's just comparing how he would have been with less experience and then more experience. Writers spent a long time drafting, redrafting. Again, that's not natural ability. Successful musician who had to be right place, right time. Again, doesn't say anything about natural ability. And photographic memory, that is natural ability employed by the security services, but obviously this does not directly relate to this. I guess if it was something like someone with photographic memory who is able to, memorize everything on a page, that would be following the same principle, but the job doesn't really relate as well as it should. Okay, so let's go over to the parallel reasoning questions now. Here we go. Okay, so as I said, parallel, totally different to the principle. You cannot just pick out one sentence. You do have to look at the overall structure. I've talked about it in previous videos, but I prefer to use like an A-B structure, trying to find what the relationship between each part of this paragraph is, and do take into account, tenses and subjects and objects and things. That's quite important. So we're saying, in order for a gritted rotor surface to freeze over, temperatures must fall to -10 or below. Above this temperature, grit will continue to melt. Since ice is formed, even on treated surfaces, the temperature must have fallen below -10. So basically saying, in order for A to take place, B must occur, which is this -10 or below, and A has in fact occurred, therefore B must have at some point happened, okay? Now, again, this is something that has already happened in the past, so we don't want to look at things that may happen, will happen, could happen. We want must, okay? There has to be a definite relationship between A and B. So in order to make bread successfully, it is essential. So we do have a must in here, reach the temperature of 200 or above. If this isn't, the bread will not rise. The bread has not risen, so here's where we're wrong, because we're saying A hasn't happened. Temperatures at 37 cause chocolate to melt and release some of the oils. When it cools, whitish residue is left behind. Since it has a whitish residue, at some point it must have been kept. Almost, but there's too many steps here really. You've got the melting, the releasing, and then the cooling again. We want more of a direct relationship between A and B. A fever is medically defined as over 37.7. A diagnosis may be given below this point. The patient's notes state that he had a fever. We can be confident its temperature was 37. No, not really, because this is not saying that A happened because of B. A has happened, so B. This is not the same structure. Iron melts in excess of this degree. Without reaching this, it is impossible to cast iron. So, yep. Although we don't know exactly how some of the earliest furnaces worked, since we have found evidence of cast iron in China from around 550 BCE, we can be sure that these ancient people found ways to reach temperatures exceeding 1538. Very wordy, but essentially the same thing. For cast iron, temperature is necessary. We found cast iron, temperature must have been reached. So D will be the answer. And then we can look at this one too. Ideally coffee, already from this it's not going to be correct, to be honest, ideally. And then this is talking about flavour, bitter, it's not going to be correct. So the parallel, it's never a case of, oh, it's almost the answer or it's similar, or you shouldn't really be confused between two particular points. It really should just be quite obvious which answer they want from you. Okay. Following a few simple rules can help you keep your job. For instance, if you arrive late for work, you will definitely get fired. So if you do Act A, you will get fired. You lost your job. B did happen, so A must have happened. So A definitely causes B, and B happened, so A must have happened, okay? It's not the best argument in the world, but it is, we're just trying to parallel it. You need a membership card to use the services. You don't have a membership card, so you can't use the gym. It's not quite the same thing. So it's not saying that it really so basically they're saying that because of A, B will definitely happen. This is not the same thing, because this is saying this is required in order to use some services, but the fact of the matter is it should be you can't use the gym, so you don't have a membership card or something, so it's the wrong order. If a company wants to be successful, it needs to insist on punctuality. A company does not take punctuality seriously, so it will not be successful. Again, this is not really the same thing, because it's a will thing. It's going to happen in the future. That's not the same structure that we want. It's something that's already taken place. Disciplinary action is initiated against all workers who do not wear a helmet. Maria must have worn a helmet. Again, wrong order. We want something to have happened in this order. This is something that hasn't happened. If you turn up the volume, music gets louder. Music is very loud now, which means you must have turned up the volume. Perfect. Because of A, B will happen. B's happened. A must have been the case. Again, with parallel questions, I do recommend that you go through all of the options though, just to be sure, because they can kind of have one that looks really similar. Unless you're super confident, you can get tripped up a little bit. So I do recommend you double check by running through the answers. Okay, a lot of people who fear snakes imagine their skin is slimy. So people who think A believe B. Snakes are not slimy. B is actually not true. Therefore, if these people were better informed, they would lose their fear of snakes. So if they knew B, they wouldn't have a fear of snakes. So many people who are on Facebook think they have more friends than people who are not. So without looking at that, the rest of that should be something along the lines of they do not have more friends, and if they knew this, they would not think that they have more friends. Whereas it just says stop using Facebook. A lot of birds that get fed become lazy about finding food and are less able to survive in the wild. No, this is not repeated in any, it has to come out first. Many people who know that ice floats do not know it is less dense than water. If they knew that ice was less dense than water, they would know this doesn't even work, because it's not changing a belief or thought that they had before. A lot of so-called modern art is regarded as rubbish by people who visit galleries. If they knew that, this doesn't work either, because it has to be an assumption that you can change, basically. Many people who won't vote Conservative think that Conservatives are all posh. If they knew that not all Conservatives are posh, they would be willing to vote for them. This is clearly the right structure that we have here, a nice little mirror of the two. The rest of them are not. I believe that is the last parallel reasoning question. So in the next one, I'll cover the remaining questions. But yeah, as you can see, I think that was like 14-ish questions in total. So more than half the questions really have been done just with those 3 types of questions, and then the remaining are split up between flaw, assumption, weaken, strengthen, and drawing conclusions. So you can see how much of a majority these 3 types really take into account. So really do focus and make sure that you've got those questions really confident in your head about how you would solve them, and most importantly, solving them quickly. So I'll see you in the next video, and I hope that was helpful.